Nero. The name alone conjures images of tyranny, extravagance, and chaos. His very mention evokes a sense of dread and fascination, a blend of horror and intrigue that has persisted through the ages. His reign, spanning from 54 to 68 AD, remains one of the most controversial in Roman history. During these 14 years, the Roman Empire saw both grandeur and grotesque excess, moments of cultural flourishing and instances of brutal repression. Was he a monster, a madman, or simply a product of his time? The question lingers, inviting us to delve deeper into the psyche of a man who wielded immense power and faced immense pressures. To understand Nero, one must first understand the woman who orchestrated his ascent to the throne, his mother, Agrippina the Younger. Agrippina was not just any Roman woman, she was a force of nature, a woman whose ambition knew no bounds and whose influence was felt throughout the empire. Agrippina was a woman of immense ambition and influence. Her determination to see her son rise to power was matched only by her cunning and strategic mind. She was a master of political maneuvering, using every tool at her disposal to achieve her goals. She was the great-granddaughter of Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and she was determined to see her son inherit the mantle of power. This lineage gave her a sense of entitlement and a belief that her family was destined to rule. Agrippina used her cunning and connections to maneuver her way into a position of influence. She was not afraid to use manipulation, bribery, and even murder to achieve her ends. Her ambition was relentless, and she would stop at nothing to see her son on the throne. She married her uncle, the Emperor Claudius, and orchestrated the adoption of her young son Nero as his heir. This marriage was not one of love, but of convenience and strategy. Agrippina knew that by aligning herself with Claudius, she could secure Nero's future. With Claudius as emperor and Nero as his heir, Agrippina set about consolidating her power. She positioned herself as the true power behind the throne, making key decisions and ensuring that her influence was felt in every corner of the empire. She eliminated rivals, secured key positions for her allies, and ensured that Nero received the best possible education. Agrippina was meticulous in her planning, leaving nothing to chance. She knew that a well-educated Nero would be more likely to succeed as emperor. She surrounded him with tutors and philosophers, hoping to mold him into the ideal Roman ruler. Seneca's teachings were meant to instill wisdom, virtue, and a sense of duty in Nero, preparing him for the immense responsibilities that lay ahead. However, Agrippina's ambition proved to be a double-edged sword. Her relentless drive for power created an environment of fear and suspicion. Those who opposed her often met with untimely ends, and her ruthless tactics earned her many enemies. While it propelled Nero to the throne, it also instilled in him a ruthlessness and paranoia that would have devastating consequences. Nero grew up in a world where betrayal and intrigue were commonplace, and this shaped his character in profound ways. Agrippina's influence over Nero was absolute, at least in the early years of his reign. She acted as his regent, making decisions on his behalf and shaping his image. Her control over him was so complete that many in the empire saw her as the true ruler. She acted as his regent, making decisions on his behalf and shaping his image. Agrippina was a master of public relations, carefully crafting Nero's image to ensure that he was seen as a strong and capable leader. However, as Nero matured, he chafed under his mother's control. He began to resent her constant interference and her attempts to dominate his life. This growing tension between mother and son would eventually lead to a dramatic and violent confrontation. He resented her interference and craved the freedom to rule as he saw fit. Nero's desire for independence grew stronger with each passing day, and he began to seek ways to break free from his mother's grasp. This power struggle between mother and son would ultimately culminate in one of the most shocking events of Nero's reign. The tension between them reached a boiling point, leading to a series of events that would change the course of Roman history forever. When Nero assumed the throne at the age of 17, there was a sense of optimism in Rome. The city, with its rich history and grandeur, seemed to be on the cusp of a new era. The young emperor, with his youthful energy and apparent commitment to justice, seemed to offer a fresh start after the tumultuous reign of Claudius. His speeches were filled with promises of reform and renewal, and the people of Rome were eager to believe in this new vision. Indeed, the first 5 years of Nero's rule, often referred to as the Quinquennium Neronis, were marked by relative peace and prosperity. The markets thrived, and the citizens enjoyed a period of stability that had been long overdue. During this period, Nero heeded the advice of his advisors, Seneca and Burrus. These wise men guided the young emperor, helping him navigate the complexities of governance and ensuring that his decisions were tempered with wisdom. He implemented reforms, reduced taxes, and focused on maintaining stability within the empire. These actions endeared him to the populace, who saw in him a leader who genuinely cared for their well-being. He showed clemency to those who had opposed his rise to power, earning him a reputation for fairness and moderation. This act of mercy was seen as a sign of his magnanimity and further solidified his standing among the people. He even engaged in public works projects, demonstrating a concern for the welfare of the Roman people. Aqueducts, roads, and public buildings were constructed, showcasing his commitment to improving the infrastructure of the empire. For a brief time, it seemed as though Nero might live up to the ideals of a wise and just ruler. The Senate, initially skeptical, began to see potential in the young emperor, and the citizens celebrated the newfound sense of hope. However, beneath the veneer of moderation, cracks were beginning to show. The pressures of leadership and the weight of expectations began to take their toll on Nero. Nero's thirst for power and his growing resentment of his mother's influence created a volatile mix. Their relationship, once a source of strength, became increasingly strained and contentious. He began to surround himself with sycophants and yes-men, indulging in lavish banquets and extravagant spectacles. These excesses were a stark contrast to the earlier years of his reign and hinted at a darker side of his personality. The seeds of tyranny were sown, waiting for the right moment to sprout. The idealized image of Nero on coins belied the growing discontent and the storm clouds gathering over Rome. Excess and cruelty, the unraveling of an emperor. As Nero's reign progressed, his darker impulses began to surface. He became increasingly autocratic, eliminating rivals and suppressing dissent with brutal efficiency. He indulged in extravagant spending, constructing opulent palaces and throwing lavish parties that drained the Roman treasury. One of the most shocking acts of Nero's reign was the murder of his own mother, Agrippina. The exact circumstances of her death are debated by historians, but it is clear that Nero ordered her execution. This act of matricide sent shockwaves through Roman society, solidifying Nero's reputation as a ruthless tyrant. It also marked a turning point in his reign, after which his behavior became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. Nero's cruelty was not limited to his family. He persecuted those he perceived as threats, real or imagined. He had his stepbrother, Britannicus, poisoned, fearing he might challenge his claim to the throne. He executed senators and aristocrats on flimsy pretexts, creating an atmosphere of fear and paranoia in Rome. The once promising emperor had transformed into a paranoid despot, more concerned with indulging his whims than with the welfare of his people. The Great Fire of Rome. Tragedy or calculated terror? Nero's reputation took a severe hit after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, which destroyed much of the city. Ancient historians accuse Nero of playing the lyre as Rome burned, a claim that is likely exaggerated but has nonetheless become legendary. Although he implemented relief measures and rebuilding efforts and even used his own money to assist victims, Nero was suspected of initiating the fire to clear space for his ambitious architectural projects. To deflect blame, Nero allegedly accused the Christians, leading to severe persecution that set a precedent for their treatment in the Roman Empire. By the final years of Nero's rule, opposition against him had grown considerably. His economic policies, marked by heavy taxation and the alienation of the Senate and aristocracy, led to unrest. In 68 AD, the Senate declared him an enemy of the state, and uprisings erupted across the empire. Faced with no other option, Nero fled Rome and committed suicide, marking the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty.